A millionaire saves a little girl locked in a car in the hot afternoon sun. A few hours later, the police arrived and arrested him for... The city pulsed with the rhythm of a bustling midday, the hum of voices, and the occasional blare of a car horn rising in discordant harmony. Matthew Crawford loosened the knot of his silk tie as the summer sun bore down on him, a cruel orb of heat that seemed intent on turning the pavement into a griddle. He exhaled deeply, the taste of asphalt and exhaust settling on his tongue, and glanced up the street. His goal was simple: a quiet diner with nothing more complicated on the menu than a club sandwich and iced tea. As he crossed the intersection, the noise of the city swelled. Bus brakes hissed, a hawker called out deals on knockoff sunglasses, and somewhere, faintly, a child's cry threaded its way through the cacophony. Matthew paused mid-step. It wasn't an ordinary cry. This was weaker, sharper, with an edge of desperation that twisted something deep inside him. He turned his head, scanning the bustling sidewalks and the endless sea of cars, reflecting the sun's glare like mirrors. The cry again. This time, clearer. His eyes locked onto a black Mercedes sedan, parked askew beneath a tree that offered only token shade. Its windows, tinted to near opacity, betrayed nothing of the interior. His brow furrowed. He glanced around at the passers-by, all engrossed in their own trajectories, none paying the slightest attention to the sound. Was he hearing things? The heat had a way of warping the mind. Then it came again, soft but insistent, cutting through the urban din like a blade. Matthew adjusted his grip on the leather briefcase in his hand. "Not your business," a voice in his head chided. "This city's full of drama you can't solve. Keep walking." Yet his feet betrayed him, pivoting toward the car, each step propelled by an unease he couldn't shake. The Mercedes gleamed malevolently under the sun, its surface hot enough to burn. As he approached, a chill ran down his spine, despite the heat. Up close, he could make out a faint movement behind the glass, a shadowy form barely discernible in the back seat. He bent closer, shielding his eyes from the glare with his hand. There, strapped into a car seat, was a child. Her small face flushed an angry red, her hair plastered with sweat. Her tiny fists fluttered weakly against the straps, movements growing sluggish. "God," he muttered, stepping back. His heart raced as he scanned the street. "Hey!" he shouted, waving at a woman passing by. But she walked on, earbuds firmly in place. Another man caught his eye, but he shook his head apologetically and hurried off. The air felt heavier now, oppressive, pressing down on him like an accusation. He clenched his fists. Time was not in the child's favor. His gaze darted down to the ground, and he spotted a chunk of broken concrete near the curb, jagged and dirty, but solid. His fingers tightened around it as he drew a sharp breath. "This is madness," he murmured to himself. "If I'm wrong about this." The child's head lolled to the side, her cries fading into silence. Matthew's hesitation evaporated. With a swift swing, the concrete met the glass, shattering it into a spiderweb of cracks before caving in entirely. The car alarm erupted into a cacophony of shrieks, but Matthew was already reaching inside, ignoring the shards, biting into his arm as he unbuckled the straps and pulled the child free. The heat within the car was suffocating, an oven of trapped misery. Her small body, clammy and limp, fit awkwardly in his arms. "Stay with me," he murmured, voice low and steady, as if speaking to a frightened animal. "Just stay with me." He tore off his suit jacket, wrapping it around her to shield her from the sunlight as he began to run. His dress shoes slapped against the pavement, each step feeling heavier than the last. Faces turned to watch, some curious, some concerned, others merely indifferent. But no one stopped him. The hospital loomed into view, its sterile facade promising salvation. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed through the revolving doors, his voice piercing through the orderly chaos. "Help!" he called out, the desperation in his tone silencing the room for a fraction of a second. "She's overheating, she's—" A nurse rushed forward, her arms extended towards the child. Matthew relinquished his fragile cargo, feeling the weight of her absence like an ache. The child was whisked away, and he stood frozen, blood trickling from shallow cuts on his forearms, his chest heaving as if he'd just emerged from drowning. Around him, whispers began to ripple through the room, eyes darting toward him and then away. Matthew swallowed hard. His shirt clung to him, damp with sweat and adrenaline. As the staff disappeared behind swinging double doors, he finally allowed himself to exhale, though the tension in his shoulders refused to relent. Matthew Crawford, a man accustomed to control, experienced a profound sense of unmooring for the first time in years. The child was safe for now, but something told him this wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. The emergency room was a maze of controlled chaos. Nurses moved swiftly between stations, their hands steady, but their faces drawn with focus. The muted groan of stretchers rolling across tile floors, mixed with the electronic hum of monitors. Beneath the fluorescent glare, the stark walls seemed to pulse with urgency. Matthew Crawford stood stiffly near the intake desk, his tailored shirt wrinkled and streaked with sweat. His arms bore faint streaks of blood from glass cuts, though he barely noticed the sting. His focus was locked on the double doors that had swallowed Anna moments ago. A nurse had told him to wait, but patience was a commodity he'd never been good at spending. The receptionist at the desk glanced up, clearly accustomed to such scenes. "Sir, please sit. Someone will update you soon." Matthew didn't answer. His eyes lingered on the room's frantic energy, parents clutching crying children, an elderly man slumped in a wheelchair. It all blurred together, noise without meaning. His thoughts swirled with the image of Anna, limp in his arms, her flushed face framed by damp curls. The doors to the treatment room swung open. A nurse stepped out, her expression neutral but businesslike. "She's stable for now, we're cooling her down and monitoring her vitals, but it was close." Matthew exhaled, the knot in his chest loosening slightly. "Can I—" "Not yet," she interrupted gently but firmly. "We'll let you know." Before he could respond, a figure appeared from down the hall. A man in a white coat, his strides quick but uneven. He was tall, with dark hair that framed a face worn by exhaustion. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowing when they landed on Matthew. "Where is she?" the man asked, his voice low but sharp. Matthew squared his shoulders. "Who are you?" "Daniel Anderson," the man replied, his tone clipped. "Anna's father." Though he didn't show it, the words struck Matthew hard. He gestured toward the doors behind him. "She's in there, stable," they said. Daniel's face shifted. Relief softened the hard lines of his jaw, but his eyes held an edge of disbelief. He started toward the doors, but stopped, turning back. How did this happen?" Matthew took a breath, steadying his voice. "She was in a car, locked in. The windows were up, and the heat—" His throat tightened as he pictured the scene again. "I broke the window and got her out. She was barely conscious." Daniel's gaze didn't waver, but his fists clenched at his sides. "That car," he said, his voice dropping an octave. Was it a black Mercedes?" Matthew nodded. "Parked on 84th, just under a tree." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. "That's my car, but I don't use it often. I left it at home this morning." Before Matthew could ask more, the sound of heavy boots against tile turned both their heads. Two uniformed officers approached, their expressions a mix of authority and suspicion. "Matthew Crawford," one of them asked, his tone as rigid as his posture. "Yes," Matthew replied evenly, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "We need to speak with you about a report of property damage and potential child endangerment involving a vehicle on 84th Street. "Wait." Daniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the officer's statement. "He saved her. My daughter. If he hadn't—" "Sir," the officer interrupted, his hand raised. "We'll handle this." As the second officer gestured for Matthew to follow them, the room seemed to pause. But before any of them could move, another group of officers entered the emergency room. These men walked with an air of purpose, their eyes locked on Daniel. "Dr. Daniel Anderson?" one of them asked, pulling a set of handcuffs from his belt. Daniel stiffened. "What is this?" "You're under arrest for suspicion of involvement in the death of Donna Sherman," the officer said flatly. "What?" Daniel's voice rose, the disbelief thick in his tone. "Donna, no, that's not, this is a mistake." "We'll discuss it downtown," the officer replied, gripping Daniel's arm. Matthew watched, his fists clenched at his sides as Daniel was cuffed and led away. He tried to process what he'd just heard. Donna Sherman, Anna in the car, the sudden accusations. It didn't add up. None of it did. As the doors closed behind Daniel and the officers, Matthew caught one last look at the doctor's face, pale but defiant. His words echoed in the suddenly quieter room. "Take care of Anna." Matthew's jaw tightened. The chaos of the emergency room seemed distant now, as though he were standing in a vacuum. He wasn't a man who believed in fate, but something about this situation felt inescapable, like a current pulling him under. He glanced back toward the treatment room, where Anna still fought her way back to stability. Whatever this mess was, he was in it now, and he wasn't about to let it spiral further out of control. The air inside the precinct was stale, heavy with the scent of cheap coffee and the faint tang of disinfectant. The sterile environment offered no solace, only amplifying the cold reality of what was unfolding. Matthew Crawford sat stiff-backed on a metal chair in a small, windowless room. Across from him, an officer scribbled notes in a battered notebook, his skepticism evident in the way he studied Matthew between questions. "You're telling me," the officer said, leaning back in his chair, "that you just happened to be walking by, heard crying, and decided to smash the window of a car you didn't recognize?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Matthew replied evenly, though his patience was thinning. "Would you rather I had walked away and let her die in that oven of a car?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "I'd rather you let the authorities handle it." Matthew exhaled sharply, suppressing the urge to argue further. The authorities weren't there. I was. The door creaked open, and another officer stepped in, murmuring something to his colleague. The first officer nodded, then gestured for Matthew to stay put before exiting the room. Left alone, Matthew clenched his fists on the table, the faint sting of the glass cuts reminding him of the stakes. Daniel Anderson was being interrogated somewhere in this building, and Anna's life hung in the balance. Across the hall, Daniel sat slumped in his own chair, his white coat now a crumpled reminder of the life he'd left at the hospital. His jaw was tight, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. The officer opposite him slid a photograph across the table. Donna Sherman, her expression frozen in a grainy, still frame. "We found this note," the officer began, his tone clinical. He pulled a plastic evidence bag from a folder and placed it on the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were smeared, but legible. Accusations scrawled with a desperation that seemed to leap off the page. "I can't take it anymore. Daniel's cruelty is too much." Daniel stared at it, his throat tightening. This doesn't make sense," he managed, his voice cracking. Donna worked with me for years. She was my daughter's caretaker. She trusted me. According to this, the officer said, tapping the bag, she didn't trust you at all. Daniel shook his head, his mind racing. You think I forced her to write that, or worse? His voice rose, filling the room with echoes of anguish. She was stressed, yes, but this? Dr. Anderson, we've spoken to colleagues who mentioned tension between the two of you. Care to explain? Daniel clenched his eyes shut, flashbacks flooding his mind. Donna, her hands trembling as she handed him Anna's medical report, her terse responses when he asked if she was okay. She had been distant lately, distracted. He had assumed it was personal, something outside of work. He hadn't pressed, something he now regretted deeply. She was under pressure, Daniel said finally, his voice quieter. But I never mistreated her. She was like family. Family doesn't write notes like this, the officer countered, sliding the evidence back into the folder. Or end up dead. The word struck Daniel with force. He sat motionless, the gravity of the accusation sinking in. I didn't do this, he whispered. Back in Matthew's room, the door opened again, and the first officer returned, his expression unreadable. Mr. Crawford, he said, you're free to go for now. However, we will be closely monitoring your actions. Wonderful, Matthew muttered, rising to his feet. Now, where's Anna? The officer hesitated. Temporary custody arrangements have been made. You're listed as her guardian for now. Matthew froze. What? I barely know her. It's either you or Child Protective Services, the officer said bluntly. Dr. Anderson requested you, said he trusts you to keep her safe. The weight of the responsibility settled over him like a heavy coat. Fine, Matthew said at last, his voice low. Where is she? Anna was asleep in a quiet room, her tiny frame dwarfed by a too large hospital blanket. Matthew stood in the doorway, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the floor. She stirred faintly, her face still pale, but her breathing steady. For a moment Matthew lingered, his hands shoved into his pockets. The chaos of the past hours replayed in his mind. Daniel's arrest, the cryptic accusations, the weight of Anna's fragile life now resting on his shoulders. He didn't know this child or her father, yet their lives had become inexplicably intertwined. He stepped closer, pulling a chair to her bedside. It's just you and me now, he murmured softly, though the words felt strange coming out. We'll figure this out. I promise. As he sat back, the sterile walls seemed to close in, the weight of unanswered questions pressing down. Who had written that note? Why had Donna's life ended this way? And how had Anna been caught in the middle of it all? Matthew didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was certain. He wasn't about to let this story end here. The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime, revealing the pristine interior of Matthew Crawford's penthouse. The space was an exercise in understated opulence. Polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sprawling view of Manhattan, and carefully curated art pieces adorning the walls. Yet tonight it felt cavernous and alien. Matthew stepped inside, carrying a sleeping Anna cradled in his arms. Her tiny face, still pale from the ordeal, rested against his shoulder. The faint sound of her breathing was the only thing grounding him as he crossed the threshold. Welcome back, Mr. Crawford, a soft voice greeted. His personal assistant, Eleanor, appeared from the shadows, her expression equal parts calm and curious. She glanced at the child, her brow furrowing slightly. I prepared the guest room as you requested. This must be Anna. Matthew nodded curtly, his grip tightening slightly on the child. She's been through hell. I'll explain later. Right now, I need to get her settled. Eleanor led him to the guest suite, her steps quiet and efficient. The room was modest compared to the rest of the penthouse, its muted tones designed for comfort rather than grandeur. Matthew laid Anna down gently on the bed, her small frame barely disturbing the plush duvet. He lingered for a moment, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I've set up a monitor so you can hear her from the living room," Eleanor said, her voice low. "Anything else?" Matthew shook his head. "Not for now. Thank you." Eleanor hesitated. "If you need help navigating this, I'm here." Matthew didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened, and he gave a brief nod before leaving the room. Eleanor watched him go, her expression unreadable. In the dim light of his study, Matthew sat at his desk, his laptop open before him. The screen glowed faintly, illuminating his furrowed brow as he sifted through a barrage of news articles, police reports, and personal notes. A tumbler of whiskey sat untouched at his elbow. The story of Donna Sherman's death was as tragic as it was bizarre. According to the reports, her body had been found at the base of the East River Bridge. The suicide note, stark and accusatory, painted a picture of despair fueled by years of mistreatment. But the details didn't sit right with Matthew. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "A bridge in the middle of the night," he muttered to himself. "No witnesses, no cameras. Just a note." He scrolled through images from the police file, his eyes narrowing as he studied the photograph of the note. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. "I can't take it anymore. Daniel's cruelty is too much." The words were damning, but they felt off. Donna had been a professional, calm, composed, meticulous. A woman like that didn't just unravel overnight. He opened another tab, pulling up articles about Donna's life. She had worked for Daniel for 5 years, starting shortly after his wedding. Testimonials described her as diligent, protective, and deeply loyal to Anna. If there had been tension between her and Daniel, it hadn't been public knowledge. Matthew's mind flicked back to his brief conversations with Daniel. The man's shock and confusion had been genuine, almost too raw to fake. And yet, someone wanted him out of the way. Flashbacks of Donna's final moments haunted Matthew as he read the police report. The narrative played out in fragmented, grainy clarity. A lone figure standing on the bridge, the harsh wind whipping at her coat. She clutched the railing, her expression unreadable in the shadows. Then, the leap. Matthew stared at the still frames in the file. "It's too clean," he murmured. "Too convenient." He closed the file and switched tabs, accessing the city's traffic camera network. His fingers moved deftly over the keyboard, searching for footage near where Anna had been found. Hours passed as he scoured the feeds, most of them useless, marred by bad angles or obstructed views. Then he saw it. A parked black Mercedes, its glossy exterior shimmering under the pale glow of a street lamp. A shadowy figure approached the car, moving quickly but deliberately. The camera's feed flickered, and when it resumed, the car was empty. Matthew rewound the footage, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a malfunction. Someone had tampered with the camera, likely to erase evidence. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. The figure was too distant to identify, but their intent was unmistakable. Eleanor knocked softly on the study door, breaking his concentration. "It's late, sir. You should rest." Matthew gestured toward the screen, his voice low but sharp. "Look at this. Someone tampered with the cameras near the car. Whoever did this wanted to make sure no one saw what really happened." Eleanor stepped closer, her face darkening as she watched the footage. "This isn't random," she said quietly. "Someone planned this." Matthew's gaze didn't waver from the screen. Donna didn't write that note. And Daniel didn't put Anna in that car. Someone's pulling strings, and I'm going to find out who. As the footage replayed in an endless loop, Matthew's resolve hardened. The inconsistencies were piling up, and the pieces were beginning to form a picture, one that painted Donna's death not as a tragedy, but as a carefully orchestrated cover-up. For now, though, it was still incomplete, and the longer the truth stayed buried, the more dangerous the game became. The hum of the car repair shop was a steady backdrop, punctuated by the occasional clank of tools and bursts of compressed air. Matthew stepped inside, the smell of oil and rubber greeting him like an unwelcome guest. He felt out of place in his tailored coat and polished shoes, but he ignored the curious glances from the mechanics. "Can I help you?" A man in grease-streaked overalls approached, wiping his hands on a rag. His name tag read, Tony. Matthew pulled out his phone and tapped the screen to bring up a still frame of the black Mercedes. "I need to access dash cam footage from cars parked near this location." He slid the phone across the counter, showing the coordinates and timestamp. Tony squinted at the screen. "Is this some kind of official business?" "Not exactly," Matthew replied, "but it's urgent. I'll pay whatever it takes." The mechanic's skeptical expression softened slightly. "Well, I've got a couple of clients who swear by their dash cams. Give me a few minutes to see if anyone was in the area around that time." Matthew nodded, stuffing his hands into his coat pockets as Tony disappeared into the back. The minutes stretched on, each one gnawing at his patience. The repair shop's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, their cold illumination reflecting off the scuffed tile floor. He turned as Tony re-emerged, holding a USB stick. "Got lucky," the man said, handing it over. "One of our customers was parked nearby. Don't know if it's what you're looking for, but it's a start." Back in his car, Matthew plugged the USB into his laptop, the device balanced precariously on the console. The first few minutes of footage were uneventful. Cars passing, a pedestrian walking their dog, the distant glow of streetlights. But then the black Mercedes came into view. Matthew's grip tightened on the laptop. The car slowed to a stop, its brake lights casting an eerie red glow on the pavement. Moments later, another vehicle, a dark SUV, pulled up behind it. Two men got out, their movements deliberate but casual, as if they had rehearsed this moment 100 times. The camera's resolution wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make out the men's actions. One approached the driver's side door, opening it with a tool that looked like a slim jim. The other circled to the passenger side and yanked the door open, revealing Donna Sherman in the driver's seat, her face pale with shock. She clutched Anna tightly in her arms. The scene unfolded in eerie silence, save for the hum of the laptop's fan. The men gestured aggressively, one grabbing Donna by the arm, while the other snatched Anna and placed her in the back seat of the Mercedes. Donna resisted, but she was no match for the man's strength. Within seconds, she was dragged toward the SUV. Matthew hit pause, his breath catching in his throat. The footage confirmed what he had feared. Donna's disappearance wasn't a suicide. It was an abduction. He rewound the video, scrutinizing every detail. The men's faces were mostly obscured, but one moment, a turn of the head as the taller man glanced back, offered a fleeting glimpse. Matthew froze the frame and leaned closer. The angle was poor, but the man's sharp cheekbones and slicked-back hair sparked a flicker of recognition. He grabbed his phone, pulling up the police database he had managed to gain access to through his private connections. His fingers moved quickly, inputting the vague description. Moments later, a name appeared on the screen. Victor Reyes, a known enforcer with ties to shady pharmaceutical ventures, including a company linked to experimental drug trials. Matthew stared at the name, his mind racing. Victor wasn't just a thug, he was connected. And if he was involved, this went deeper than Donna or Daniel. Someone powerful was orchestrating this, and Donna had become collateral damage. Matthew leaned back against the driver's seat, exhaling slowly. His thoughts drifted to Anna, asleep in his penthouse under Eleanor's watchful eye. She was the fragile thread connecting everything, the silent witness to a conspiracy that had cost her caretaker's life and upended her father's. His phone buzzed, jolting him back to the present. It was Eleanor. "Everything okay?" he asked. "She's fine," Eleanor replied, sleeping soundly. "Did you find anything?" Matthew hesitated, glancing at the paused frame on his laptop. "Yes," he said finally, "but it raises more questions than answers." "Be careful, Matthew," Eleanor said, her voice tinged with concern. "Whoever did this isn't playing games." He ended the call, staring at the name on his phone screen. Victor Reyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. If Matthew had learned anything in his life, it was that a single thread could unravel an entire web. He closed the laptop, his resolve hardening. Donna hadn't died for nothing, and Daniel wouldn't rot in a cell for a crime he didn't commit. Someone had targeted this family, and Matthew intended to find out why, no matter the cost. The prison visitation room was a bleak rectangle of cinder-block walls and fluorescent lighting that buzzed faintly overhead. Rows of steel tables bolted to the floor formed neat, impersonal lines. A correctional officer stood by the door, watching the room with the detached vigilance of someone who had seen it all. Matthew Crawford sat stiffly at one of the tables, his hands clasped in front of him. Across the room, Daniel Anderson emerged from another door, his movements slow and deliberate. His face was gaunt, his once immaculate demeanor dulled by days of confinement. The orange jumpsuit hung awkwardly on his frame, a jarring contrast to the man Matthew had first met in the hospital. Daniel sat across from him, the scrape of the chair's metal legs echoing through the room. "You came," he said, his voice low but steady. "I wasn't sure if you would." "I told you I'd help," Matthew replied, "and I've found something." Daniel's brows knit together. "What is it?" Matthew pulled a flash drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. Dashcam footage from the night Anna was found. It shows Donna being forced out of your car by two men. They took her, Daniel. This wasn't a suicide. Is this one of the weirdest stories you've heard this week? If so, leave an avocado comment below. For a moment, Daniel said nothing, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the weight of Matthew's words. "Two men," he repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Why would they target Donna?" "I was hoping you could tell me," Matthew said. "But it doesn't end there. One of them is a man named Victor Reyes. He's connected to illegal pharmaceutical operations. Does that mean anything to you?" Daniel leaned back, his hands gripping the edge of the table. His eyes drifted to the floor, his mind turning over the pieces of a puzzle he hadn't realized existed. "Megan," he murmured. Matthew leaned forward. "Megan, your wife." Daniel nodded, his voice thick with emotion. Before she died, Megan started noticing irregularities at the hospital, missing patient records, unapproved drug trials. She was a nurse, dedicated to her patients, and she couldn't ignore it. "What happened?" Matthew pressed. "She brought it up with Carlos Murphy," Daniel continued, his tone bitter. "He was the hospital director. Megan trusted him, thought he'd investigate. But she started getting pushback, being reassigned and questioned about her work ethic. She told me she felt like someone was trying to silence her." Matthew's jaw tightened. "And then she died." Daniel's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "They said it was a heart attack. Megan had a history of arrhythmia, so it was believable. But she was healthy, too healthy for it to happen so suddenly." "Do you think Murphy had something to do with it?" Matthew asked. "I didn't want to believe it," Daniel admitted. "But now, With Donna, Anna, all of this. It's too much to be coincidence. Matthew let the silence linger for a moment before asking, "Did Megan leave anything behind? Notes, files, anything that could prove what she suspected?" Daniel's expression shifted, a flicker of realization crossing his face. "The pen." Matthew frowned. "Pen?" "She had this recorder pen," Daniel explained. "It was a gift from me, something she used to document patient observations. She said it helped her keep track of everything. After she died, I found it among her things, but I didn't think much of it." "Do you still have it?" Matthew asked, his voice rising with urgency. Daniel nodded slowly. "It's in a box in my study. I couldn't bring myself to go through her belongings after she was gone. If she recorded anything, it might be on there." Matthew leaned back, processing this new thread. "I'll get it," he said, finally. "Whatever's on that pen might be what we need to prove Donna and Megan were targeted." Daniel's voice wavered. "Matthew, thank you. Not just for this, but for Anna. She doesn't deserve any of this." Matthew met his gaze, his expression resolute. "Neither do you." The guard by the door cleared his throat, signaling the end of their time. Daniel rose first, his movements stiff. As he was led back to his cell, he turned to glance over his shoulder. "Be careful," he said. "If they did this to Donna and Megan, they won't hesitate to come after you." Matthew nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the next step. As the door closed behind Daniel, sealing him back into the depths of the prison, Matthew tightened his grip on the flash drive in his pocket. Outside, the world felt sharper, heavier. The air seemed charged with the weight of secrets too long buried. The pen recorder might hold the key, but he knew the truth would come at a cost. Matthew had stepped into something far bigger than he'd anticipated, and there was no turning back now. As he drove away from the prison, his phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor. "Anna's asking for you." Matthew's lips formed a delicate line. He had no answers for Anna yet, but he was determined to find them. And whoever was behind this conspiracy, Victor Reyes, Carlos Murphy, or someone even higher up, was about to realize they'd made a grave mistake. The moon cast a cold silver glow over the suburban street as Matthew pulled his car into the shadow of a large oak tree near Daniel's house. The once lively home was now a hollow shell, its windows dark, the overgrown lawn a testament to its abandonment. Yet Matthew's gaze swept the street cautiously. A black sedan sat idling 2 blocks down, its taillights faintly glowing. "Under surveillance," he muttered to himself, killing the engine. He slipped out of the car, keeping low as he approached the house. A backpack hung over his shoulder, its contents carefully chosen: gloves, a flashlight, and a small lock-picking kit. The sound of crickets filled the air, masking the faint crunch of his shoes against the grass. The front door was locked, as expected. Matthew crouched, pulling out his tools. The lock yielded with a soft click, and he pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. The interior was a timeless snapshot of grief. Picture frames hung askew, a child's toys scattered on the living room floor. A faint layer of dust clung to every surface, mingling with the scent of stale air. Matthew stood still for a moment, his flashlight beam sweeping across the room. Every creak of the floorboards underfoot sounded deafening in the oppressive silence. Daniel's study was on the 2nd floor. Matthew moved cautiously, pausing with each step to listen for any sound beyond his own movements. When he reached the study, he slipped inside and closed the door behind him. The room was a cluttered mess, books stacked haphazardly, files spilling out of drawers, a framed photo of Daniel, Megan, and Anna sitting askew on the desk. Matthew's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that resembled a small recorder. His flashlight settled on a box tucked into the corner of the closet. The handwriting on the label read, Megan's belongings. He pulled the box out carefully, setting it on the desk. Inside, the contents were neatly arranged: a stethoscope, a few journals, and a collection of pens. Ordinary, except for one sleek silver pen with a small recording button near the clip. Matthew exhaled, relief flooding through him. He slipped the pen into his pocket, just as a sound reached his ears: the faint crunch of gravel outside. Matthew froze, his breath catching. A shadow moved across the crack beneath the door, accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps. Someone else was in the house. He switched off the flashlight and crouched behind the desk. His pulse thundered in his ears as the doorknob twisted, the door creaking open. A figure entered, silhouetted by the faint glow of a flashlight. The intruder moved methodically, their light sweeping the room. Matthew reached into his backpack, his fingers closing around a wrench. He waited, each second stretching unbearably, as the figure rifled through the desk. Then, the flashlight beam settled on the empty box in the closet. The figure cursed under their breath, a man, judging by the gravelly tone, and moved toward the desk. When the man rounded the corner, Matthew surged forward. The wrench connected with a sickening thud against the man's forearm, sending the flashlight clattering to the floor. The intruder grunted in pain, staggering back, but Matthew didn't wait. He bolted from the room, his heart pounding as he dashed down the stairs. Behind him, the man shouted something unintelligible, his heavy footsteps following closely. Matthew burst out the front door and sprinted across the lawn toward his car. He fumbled for his keys, the sound of the man's pursuit growing louder. Finally, he yanked the door open, threw himself inside, and started the engine. The tires screeched as he sped away, his breaths ragged, his hands trembling against the steering wheel. Later, in the safety of his penthouse, Matthew sat at his desk, the pen recorder clutched tightly in his hand. Anna slept soundly in the next room, her soft breathing audible through the baby monitor. He hesitated for a moment before pressing play. Megan's voice filled the room, steady, but tinged with a faint urgency. "This is Megan Anderson. If you're hearing this, I'm no longer alive." Matthew's grip tightened on the pen. "I've been documenting irregularities at St. Luke's, patients admitted for routine procedures disappearing, experimental drug trials conducted without consent. It's all connected to Carlos Murphy. I tried to report it, but now I'm being followed. If anything happens to me, look at him. He's hiding something big." Her voice cracked slightly. "I don't want to believe it, but I think he's planning to silence me. For anyone listening, please protect my family." The recording ended abruptly, leaving Matthew in stunned silence. His mind raced, piecing together the fragments of a deadly conspiracy. Donna's abduction, Daniel's imprisonment, Megan's death. They were all threads in the same web. His phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a call from his private investigator. "Matthew," the investigator said, his tone grim. "We've got a problem. The body they found, the one they said was Donna Sherman, it's not her." "What?" Matthew demanded, his voice sharp. "It's someone else, similar build, mutilated beyond recognition. Someone set this up to frame Daniel." Matthew leaned back in his chair, his heart hammering. The stakes had just risen, and the truth was more elusive and dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The days blended together in a blur of activity and restless nights. Matthew Crawford, a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, now found himself consumed by an entirely different mission: finding Donna Sherman. If she was alive, there had to be a trail, no matter how faint. He mobilized every resource at his disposal. His private investigator combed through surveillance footage and cross-referenced travel logs. Matthew called in favors with contacts who specialized in discreet, off-the-record inquiries. Check hospitals, Rural clinics, anything, he ordered during a late-night phone call. If she's out there, she's injured or restrained. Someone must have noticed something or tea. At home, his focus remained split. Between calls and meetings, he cared for Anna with a diligence that surprised even him. He helped her with puzzles, cooked simple meals she would eat without complaint, and read her bedtime stories every night. Her laughter, though rare, became the anchor that steadied him. One evening, a week after the search began, his phone buzzed. The private investigator's voice was sharp, edged with urgency. "We've got a lead. A warehouse, on the outskirts of the city. Quiet area, no cameras, but recent activity suggests it's not abandoned. Matches some chatter we intercepted." Matthew's heart quickened, and his voice was steady but firm. "Send me the location. I'll meet you there." As he ended the call, he glanced toward Anna, peacefully asleep in her room. He promised himself that no matter the danger ahead, he would bring Donna back, for Anna, for Daniel, and for the truth. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, its silhouette sharp and foreboding against the faint glow of the city skyline in the distance. Rust streaked its corrugated steel walls, and the faint hum of nearby power lines added a sinister undertone to the still night. Matthew's car idled silently a block away, headlights off, as he gripped his phone to his ear. "Inside," the investigator said. "She's alive, but just barely." Matthew's jaw tightened. "The police are on their way." "ETA 5 minutes, the voice replied. "Be careful. Whoever put her there didn't plan on her leaving." The call ended, leaving Matthew in the suffocating quiet of his car. He glanced at the passenger seat, where Megan's pen recorder lay. The revelations it held fueled his determination. He stepped out, the cold air biting against his skin, and moved toward the warehouse with cautious strides. The main entrance was bolted shut, but Matthew spotted a smaller side door hanging ajar. The faintest of sounds, labored breathing, faint and uneven, drew him in. He slipped through the opening, his flashlight casting long, thin beams across the empty space. The warehouse smelled of rust and mildew, and the faint echo of his footsteps amplified the tension clawing at his chest. Donna was there, slumped against a pillar in the center of the room. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, her face pale and gaunt under the harsh overhead light. The clothes that hung off her skeletal frame were torn and filthy. She flinched as the flashlight's beam landed on her, her sunken eyes squinting against the brightness. "Donna," Matthew whispered, rushing to her side. He crouched down, his hands carefully working at the ropes. "It's me, Matthew Crawford. You're safe now." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her body trembled as he freed her hands, and she slumped forward into his arms, barely conscious. "Help me!" she rasped, her voice cracked and dry like brittle paper. The door creaked somewhere behind them, and Matthew froze. His pulse thundered in his ears as he listened for further movement. Footsteps, faint but deliberate, echoed through the space. Without thinking, he dragged Donna behind a stack of crates, positioning himself between her and the sound. The footsteps drew closer, accompanied by low, murmured voices. Matthew strained to hear. "She's barely alive. Murphy's going to kill us if she talks." Another voice, rough and impatient, replied, "We'll make sure she doesn't." The blood drained from Matthew's face. He glanced back at Donna, who was too weak to move. He didn't have time to wait for the police. He slipped a hand into his pocket and pulled out his phone, dialing the investigator again. "They're here," he hissed. "2 men. Armed, I think." "Stay hidden," the investigator said. "Officers are 2 minutes out." Matthew's hand shook as he ended the call, the faint sound of it clicking into place louder than he'd intended. The voices stopped abruptly, and the footsteps shifted toward him. "Who's there?" one of the men barked. Matthew inhaled deeply, He spotted a rusted wrench nearby and grabbed it, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the cold metal. The first man rounded the crates, his flashlight sweeping the shadows. In a single, desperate motion, Matthew swung the wrench. The man crumpled with a grunt, his flashlight clattering to the floor. The second man shouted and charged, but the warehouse door burst open, floodlights illuminating the space as officers swarmed in. "Freeze!" the lead officer barked, his weapon drawn. The second man dropped his gun, raising his hands as chaos erupted around them. Minutes later, Matthew sat on the floor beside Donna as paramedics worked to stabilize her. The ropes around her wrists and ankles were gone, replaced with gentle hands and warm blankets. Her breathing was shallow but steady now, and color had begun to return to her face. "Donna," Matthew said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with exhaustion but clear enough to focus on him. "It's over. You're safe." Her lips trembled, and she nodded faintly. "Carlos," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He planned all of it. Megan, Daniel. He wanted them gone. I tried to stop him." Tears welled in her eyes, and Matthew gripped her hand. "You did more than enough. Rest now." Hours later, in the safety of his penthouse, Matthew played back the pen recorder for Donna. Her face, though still pale, was a mask of resolve as Megan's voice filled the room. "This is Megan Anderson. If you're hearing this, I'm no longer alive." By the time the recording ended, Donna was sitting upright, her eyes alight with determination. "I'll testify," she said, her voice firm despite her fragile state. "Carlos won't get away with this." Matthew nodded. He had the recorder, Donna's testimony, and the police on his side now. A glimmer of hope appeared for the first time since this nightmare began. But as he glanced at the city lights outside his window, he knew this was only the beginning of the fight. Carlos Murphy wouldn't go down quietly. The courtroom buzzed with tension, a quiet hum of whispers rippling through the packed benches. The air was thick with anticipation as Carlos Murphy sat at the defense table, his polished appearance a mask of control. His tailored suit fit perfectly, his posture calm, but his eyes betrayed flickers of unease as evidence against him mounted. Across the room, Daniel Anderson sat with Matthew and Donna, their presence bolstered by the weight of truth. Daniel's hands gripped the edge of the bench tightly, his knuckles white. Beside him, Donna, frail but resolute, prepared for her turn on the stand. The recorder lay in plain sight, a small but damning piece of evidence. "Ms. Sherman," the prosecutor began, her voice clear and firm as Donna took the stand. "Can you recount the events leading to your abduction and subsequent imprisonment?" Donna nodded, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "I was driving Anna to the grocery store. Everything seemed normal until I noticed a black SUV tailing me. When I pulled over to check the car seat, 2 men approached. They forced me into their vehicle and left Anna locked in my car." As she continued to recount the days of confinement, the threats and the names she overheard, the courtroom remained silent. "Carlos Murphy," she said, her voice sharp. "He orchestrated it. He wanted to silence me, just like Megan Anderson." The prosecutor played Megan's recording next. The courtroom was silent as Megan's voice echoed through the chamber, outlining the experiments, the missing patients, and her fear of being silenced. Every utterance eroded Carlos's meticulously crafted facade. By the time it ended, even the judge's face was taut with anger. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "this evidence not only confirms Mr. Murphy's involvement in illegal experiments, but also his direct role in the deaths of Megan Anderson and the attempted framing of Daniel Anderson." Although Carlos's attorney stood to object, It was evident that the battle was slipping away from them. Carlos, who had sat with quiet confidence for most of the trial, leaned forward, his composure finally breaking. His eyes locked on Daniel, cold and venomous. "If you and your wife hadn't meddled in things that didn't concern you," Carlos spat, his voice low but cutting through the silence, "your family wouldn't be here. This is your fault, Daniel. All of it." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He didn't have to. The weight of the evidence and Carlos's own outburst was damning enough. When the judge delivered the guilty verdict, the room erupted in murmurs. Carlos stood, his calm demeanor entirely unraveled. As he was led toward the exit, he turned once more to Daniel and Matthew. His voice was a chilling hiss, quiet, but full of malice. "This isn't over," he said. "You think you've won? You haven't. Anna, all of you, you'll regret this." The threat lingered in the air long after the courtroom emptied. Outside, Matthew stood with Donna and Daniel, the victory tempered by the shadow Carlos had cast. "It's done," Donna said softly, but her tone carried no relief. Matthew nodded, his gaze distant as he watched Carlos being loaded into the prison transport. "For now," he said. "But he won't stop. We have to be ready." Daniel placed a hand on Matthew's shoulder, his voice steady. "We will be. For Anna. For Megan." As the city hummed around them, the trio stood together, united by their shared fight for justice and the lingering danger they knew was far from over. The view from Matthew's penthouse stretched endlessly over the New York skyline, the shimmering city lights providing a stark contrast to the quiet that now filled the spacious rooms. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had clung to their lives began to lift, though its scars lingered like faint shadows. Anna sat cross-legged on the living room floor, her small fingers deftly assembling a puzzle. Donna knelt beside her, offering gentle encouragement as they worked together. Despite her frail appearance, Donna's voice had regained some of its warmth, and her bond with Anna was a source of comfort for both of them. In the adjoining kitchen, Daniel leaned against the counter, a steaming mug of tea in his hands. He watched Anna and Donna with a soft smile, the first genuine one Matthew had seen from him in a long time. "You've done more for us than I could ever repay," Daniel said, his voice low. "I don't even know where to begin." Matthew stood by the window, his arms crossed as he gazed at the skyline. "You don't have to," he replied simply, turning to meet Daniel's gaze. "We're not done yet. But for now, Anna needs stability. She needs both of you." Daniel nodded, the weight of the last few weeks evident in his tired eyes. "Megan would have been grateful," he said after a pause. "She always believed in standing up for what's right, even if it cost us everything." Matthew walked over, placing a firm hand on Daniel's shoulder. "She'd be proud of you, of all of us." Anna softly giggled in the living room as Donna made a playful mistake with a puzzle piece, purposefully placing it in the incorrect spot. The sound was small but infectious, and for a moment it filled the room with a sense of normalcy that felt almost foreign. "She's stronger than I thought," Daniel said, his voice tinged with admiration as he watched his daughter. "After everything—" "She's resilient," Matthew agreed, "but she's a kid. She shouldn't have to be." Donna looked up from the puzzle, her eyes meeting Matthew's. "None of this would have been possible without you," she said. "You gave us a chance to fight back." Matthew shook his head. "We all fought," he said, "and we're still fighting." As the evening settled into a calm rhythm, Anna wandered over to Matthew, tugging at his sleeve. "Mr. Matthew," she said softly, looking up at him with wide eyes, "can I sleep in the big room tonight? It feels safe there." He crouched down, his expression softening. Of course, kiddo. But only if you promise to eat every pancake tomorrow morning. Anna grinned, her smile lighting up her face. Deal. As she skipped off toward her temporary bedroom, Matthew straightened, his gaze following her. She deserves a little joy after all this, he murmured. She does, Daniel said. We all do. Matthew turned back, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Speaking of joy, he said, his tone lighter, I have a surprise for Anna tomorrow. Something I think will help her feel more at home. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What kind of surprise? You'll see, Matthew said, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Let's just say it's long overdue. The weight of Carlos's threat still hung in the back of their minds. But for now, in this fleeting moment, they allowed themselves the luxury of hope. Together, they began the slow process of healing, rebuilding the fragile pieces of their lives. And for Anna's sake, they vowed to face whatever came next. Together, they began the slow process of healing, rebuilding the fragile pieces of their lives. And for Anna's sake, they vowed to face whatever came next. Together. The golden glow of the setting sun bathed Matthew's sprawling estate in warm hues, the manicured lawns and gardens alive with laughter and chatter. It was a rare day, one that felt untouched by the shadows of the past. The air was filled with the scent of freshly grilled food and the faint sound of music drifting from speakers hidden among the bushes. Anna's giggles rang out as she chased a butterfly across the grass, her hair bouncing with every step. Donna stood nearby, her health visibly improving as she called out playful warnings. Careful, Anna. Butterflies are quick. Matthew watched from the patio, a glass of lemonade in his hand, the weight of the past weeks slowly lifting. He turned to Daniel, who stood beside him, gazing at his daughter with a mix of pride and wistfulness. She's happy, Daniel said softly. For the first time in what feels like forever. Matthew nodded. She deserves to be. So do you. Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I've been meaning to ask you something, he said, his tone almost shy. He opened the box to reveal a simple silver chain with a small charm, a symbolic gesture of guardianship. Matthew, would you be Anna's godfather? You've been more of a father figure to her than I could ever repay. Matthew's throat tightened, but he masked it with a quiet chuckle. You sure you want me for the job? I'm not exactly godfather material. Daniel smiled. You've done more for her, and for us, than anyone else could have. I can't think of anyone better. Matthew took the chain, the weight of it heavy in his palm. I'd be honored, he said simply, his voice steady. As the evening wore on, Anna joined Matthew and Daniel on the patio. She climbed onto Matthew's lap, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked. Are you happy, Mr. Matthew? She asked, her eyes searching his face. Matthew smiled, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. Happier than I've been in a long time, kiddo. Donna approached with plates of cake, handing one to Anna, who squealed with delight. You've got frosting on your nose already, Donna teased, dabbing at Anna's face with a napkin. The light-hearted moment brought a warmth that felt almost surreal. It was as if the world had paused, giving them a reprieve they desperately needed. As night fell, the garden transformed into a haven of twinkling lights strung through the trees. The soft glow illuminated the table where they all sat, sharing stories and laughter. At one point, Daniel raised his glass, his voice steady but full of emotion. To Megan, he said, his eyes glistening as he looked toward the sky. For her courage, her love, and the family she left behind. I hope we've made her proud. The group raised their glasses in unison, the silence that followed heavy with unspoken words. Anna climbed into her father's lap, resting her head on his chest. "Mommy's proud," she murmured, her voice barely audible but full of certainty. Toward the end of the evening, Matthew stood and gestured for everyone to follow him to the lawn. "I promised Anna a surprise," he said, his tone light. "And I always keep my promises." He handed Anna a small remote and knelt beside her. "Press that button," he said. She did, and the sky exploded in a cascade of colors as fireworks lit up the night. Anna clapped her hands, her eyes wide with wonder. Donna gasped softly, and even Daniel smiled, the tension in his face melting away as the bursts of light painted their faces. Matthew glanced around at the people who had become his family, a sense of peace settling over him. The fight wasn't over, but for now, they had this moment, a new beginning forged from the trials they had endured. As the final firework faded into the night sky, Anna turned to Matthew, her face glowing with joy. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. Matthew held her close, his voice soft but firm. "Always. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.